Well, the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 officially announced yesterday. Pretty cool. And we're going to talk about some nerdy stuff. So I got my glasses on, so I'm in character. So, interesting thing. A lot of you may not care about this, but it was interesting to me because the new system on a chips, SoCs as they're called, it's a big deal because basically that kind of gives you a picture of what you're going to get out of your flagship phones for the next year. So this last generation, 2022, we got the Snapdragon 8 Generation 1. Pretty good chip. Not the best on heat or battery, but performance pretty darn good. And then they kind of tuned it up a little bit and gave us the 8 Plus Generation 1. Now we have the 8 Generation 2. So with the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2, they're boasting about a 30-35% overall performance increase over the 8 Plus Generation 1. And that kind of boils down to, you got to look at some certain factors. But there's one really interesting thing to me. So they're talking about a primary core speed of 3.2 gigahertz, that's pretty good. I mean, it's really fast. However, what really impressed me, whenever you talk about a system on a chip, I'm going to kind of devolve this conversation and step back just a little bit. I actually have a system on a chip. This right here is the Dimensity 9200 from MediaTek. And you can see it's itty bitty bitty. Like, it's really small. I actually have last year's Dimensity 9000 as well. So this is what the little chip is inside your phone that powers everything. And it powers a lot. So inside of a system on a chip, and they call it that because they just jam-pack everything in there. When you talk about traditional computer architecture like in a computer, everything's separated. And for years and years, separate meant better because that meant it could specialize. Well, they found a way to specialize and put all of that into the one tiny processor in your phone that still clocked over 3 gigahertz, which is a lot. So inside the system on a chip, you have your computer processor, you have your modem, you have your GPU, and you also have what Google likes to call their tensor processing unit, but really it's the part of the processor that does your machine learning, AI, all of that cool stuff. And it's also got the image sensor processor on there as well. So all that stuff works together to give you an amazing experience on your phone. Well, when you look at the individual cores, that kind of tells you a little bit about the language of how the processor works. So they changed things up this year. In the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2, there are 8 cores. It's an 8-core processor, just like what you get with a lot of your modern desktop processors nowadays. So they have the top speed primary core, which is responsible for all the heavy lifting. It really ramps up, talking 3.2 gigahertz, and there are actually some benchmarks out there that say it could go as high as up to like 3.5, which we will likely see in the 8 Plus Generation 2 later on in the year. But keep this in mind, the primary core, 3.2 gigahertz. The performance cores, so they're kind of separated out. So you've got the high-powered performance core, then you've got the regular performance cores, which kind of do most of the heavy lifting, but not the super high-powered stuff. And then you have the efficiency cores down on the bottom. And the way they do that, a lot of different chipsets do it differently, but it seems like lately they're trying to customize them more for a better overall experience, realizing you don't always need that massive 3.2 gigahertz core kicking in to do stuff. That's what kills your phone. That's what drains the battery because it's cooking. It's using a lot of gas to get there. So, and one interesting thing they did with the chip here is they changed the alignment of the cores. So instead of having one high power core and then you've got normally they go 1, 3, 4. So the way they break it up, 8-core processor, 1 high speed core, 3 performance cores, and then 4 efficiencies. They kind of flipped the script and they went with 1 high speed performance core, and then they've got they've got 4 performance cores, and then they've got 3 efficiency cores. So that's going to give you a lot better power and bandwidth management, especially when you're doing multitasking. And I like where they're going with this because they also really ramped up the clock speed. I believe the 8 Generation 1 or 8 Plus Generation 1, those cores, not only were they older architecture, all that stuff, but they were rated at 2.5 gigahertz. And now you're going to get 4 of them instead of 3 with the 8 Generation 2 clocked at 2.8 gigahertz. And just to put that in perspective, if I remember off the top of my head, the Google Tensor 2 is rated, their primary core is at 2.87 gigahertz, I believe. And it's got 2 primary cores, but that you're talking under 3 gigahertz right there, 2.87. The primary core on the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 is 3.2 gigahertz, and then the 4 performance cores are 2.8. So you're going to get 4 cores in the performance arena that are almost as powerful as the 2 primary cores that you get with the Tensor 2. So that's really impressive, and I think it's really going to show up on paper. I think it's going to be a big win for the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 and whatever phone platform it goes into going into the new year, which of course the most notable one is going to be the Samsung Galaxy S23 series phones. And the Ultra is going to be the best one out of that lot, having the most features, all the crazy amazing stuff that goes along with it. But it's interesting to see what they do with this and how they've kind of reworked it to give you a different experience with the overall phone. The overall benefit you're going to get from this reconfiguration is they're talking about 40% better battery life, 40% better battery performance. And I think that that's going to be good because you want that extra savings there. That's what kills your phone a lot of times, is how it uses the power management, the battery efficiency. So power efficiency at a 40% increase is really good. So what we're looking at overall, though, when you break everything down, I mean, yes, they've got the increased improvement for the hexagon core that powers all the AI and machine learning. They're saying it's 4.35 times faster, up to about, I think, 60% efficiency faster. So you're going to get better stuff when it comes to AI machine learning stuff. This is going to be really big, especially combined with the ISP, the image sensing processor that's going to go with the camera on whatever phone you're using. So it's going to make faster portrait shots, faster, better bokeh. You're going to get better nighttime shots. You're going to get better enhancements on things like what you would get with Magic Eraser on the Google Pixel phone. So all the things that it does, that it dials in and it uses all of that smart stuff, the machine learning, AI, all that technology is going to be impressively faster. So that's really good. So also, it's got a new GPU as well. And I wanted to bring this on board and talk about it today. So graphics processing unit, that's what powers all your stuff for your gaming, the stuff you see on the screen. This sucker is going to be able to support up to 144 hertz at 4K resolution, which is pretty impressive. This is a GPU. This is the GeForce GTX 1660 Super. It's about 3 years old, maybe 4 years old now. This is what goes inside like a cheap gaming computer. Probably costs you about $500-600 nowadays. Not for this, but the entire computer package. Prices have dropped so much. It's funny, this thing a year ago was probably worth like $500. It's just insane. It's really not that expensive of a card, but it's really interesting when you look at something this big, and this is just for your graphics on your PC, and then you look at this for a phone, and it powers everything. Modem, processor, graphics, physics, machine learning, everything. All of it in that tiny little thing. Well, one thing that you need to pay attention to, you see this? When you have a desktop graphics card, you have a dedicated cooling fan. In fact, there's usually a lot of cooling, and that's something that's, well, it's just not really in phones because they can't really make the phone slim and all that crazy stuff and sexy when they've got a big powered fan inside of them. They rely on passive cooling, heat piping, thermal management, heat sinks, all sorts of stuff like that to keep them cooler. So ideally, the big thing here is hopefully, even with all this extra raw power, the realignment of the performance cores, new GPU, impressive metrics when it comes to the stuff like machine learning and AI, is we should get a better overall well-rounded processing experience that doesn't heat up the phone as much. So, like they said, 40% better power management when it comes to battery, but also the chipset's more powerful. And it's more powerful in a lot of different ways. It's not just straight line speed, but there's also a lot more bandwidth in between for multitasking. Also, they're bringing spatial audio onto the chip. So this has kind of been relegated. You look at something like the AirPods Pro 2, the spatial audio is done on the chip. It's not necessarily done in a dedicated chip on the phone, at least not that I know of. This right here is going to take care of that. So even if you don't have one of those fancy headsets, you should still be able to get some sort of spatial audio if it's tuned in or brought into the sound package somehow. Of course, you still got great codecs for the sound experience, Bluetooth 5.3, low-powered Bluetooth, and you're going to get your high-fidelity audio, hi-fi audio capabilities as well. So, better in audio, better in GPU, better in pretty much everything. It's got the new X70 modem, and, well, if you care about modems, I think that they did a pretty good job with the Snapdragon 8 Generation 1 and 8 Plus Generation 1, so we've got even more improvements here. Better overall modem experience. You're going to be able to take advantage of that as well. Plus, But wait, there's more. Supports Wi-Fi 7. So this was actually talked about here a couple days ago. I've actually got a video coming out. I'm going to talk about the MediaTek Dimensity 9200. They also have Wi-Fi 7 in there. So it's funny, they released theirs last week, and I was the MediaTek Executive Summit 2022. I have a video coming out about that. I want to talk specifically about the 9200. Also some really, really impressive stuff there, but they were the first ones to launch their chip. They beat out the Snapdragon Summit with Qualcomm by a week. A lot of the same things they advertise, improvements to the APU, which is basically their tensor chip. It's funny, I wish they would come up with different names. They call it the hexagon core in the Snapdragon. They call it the APU in the MediaTek chip. They call it the tensor core inside of, or the tensor processing unit, TPU, inside of the Google Pixel phones and their Tensor G2 to G1 chips. So I wish they would get kind of their names online. They call it the neural processing engine on the iPhone. So it all does the same thing. All the machine learning, AI, which has been the big boost. But what I like that I see this year with these chips is they're increasing horsepower, increasing efficiency for battery and performance, but also really chasing after the AI machine learning. So what we got before, like the Snapdragon 865, very, very good, but it was kind of weak in the department on the AI machine learning. That was a big emphasis when they bumped up to the 888, and an even more emphasis going to the 8th generation 1. So they really pushed the envelope on that more, but they kind of didn't put as much emphasis on the cores and the performance themselves. So now what I'm seeing with the 8th generation 2, it looks like they really went after it in the performance, in the experience, the efficiency, but also really bumped up the hexagon core, and well, they're really going after it more with the machine learning AI, which I think is pretty cool. That's like the big frontier. Also with the ISP, it is supporting cameras up to 200 megapixels, which, I mean, the previous generation one did that already, but just kind of some foreshadowing because we've already had that 200 megapixel camera deployed in a couple of phones. I'm fully expecting to see it in the S23 Ultra, at least once it comes out, probably announced end of January, early February. So all these things, it's just new foreshadowing. There aren't any official benchmarks that have been released yet. There have been some leaked ones. I don't really pay attention to those. I mean, the stuff's through the roof. I mean, really, there's not a whole lot out there that you can get. Like, if you go, let's say you get a Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 tomorrow, you wake up, this S23 from Samsung is there, you can pick it up. Day-to-day performance, you're probably not going to notice a lot of things. What you're going to pay attention to is the heat management, the battery, how quickly your photos are processing, especially with things like low light, portrait video. That stuff's really going to get some amplification, and then you're still going to be able to play all your other stuff. You can play your Apex, you can play your Fortnite, you can do all these cool things, and ideally it's going to run cooler, and it's going to be more powerful, and you're going to get better battery life. That's what was sorely missing with the 8 Generation 1. They kind of tweaked it a little bit with the 8 Plus Generation 1, but the 8 Generation 1, they had throttling issues, they had software throttling stuff that they got caught on with Samsung and also with OnePlus. So, looking at the 8 Generation 2, I really hope those metrics show up because I really want to see these things. And the other nice thing is with the GPU, you're getting an additional 25% performance there as well. So, you're getting more performance out of the cores, you're getting more performance out of the GPU, you're getting better power efficiency overall, and they even added ray tracing, hardware-based ray tracing technology for gaming. Ray tracing has been a big staple of the RTX series graphics that have come a long way the last couple of years from NVIDIA. Well, now that ray tracing experience is going to carry over, you're going to get it on the phone, and that was actually something also talked about at the MediaTek Summit, the Executive Summit here this last week. So the other chip that we're going to talk about, the 9200 Dimensity, it brought hardware-based ray tracing last week. So they were the first ones to punch out publicly with it. But of course, the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 is also bringing that to the table. So there's a lot of great stuff going on here in this chip. And I think it's going to be a really nice experience for the end of 2022. You'll probably see some sort of a Xiaomi phone come out with it in the very near future. I think they're also rumored the Vivo X90 or something like that. But you're going to see probably a Chinese-based phone get this first. And then the big announcement for the US market is going to be whatever the inevitable S23 is going to be, whether that comes out at the end of January, early February. That's what you're going to see it in, and I'm really, really hopeful for that. I'm hoping that we're going to see some great stuff. We're already talking 40% better battery efficiency, but Also, the anticipation of the light mode being enabled with the S23. It's been a big power saver already that gives you most of the day-to-day performance. You don't really notice much of a difference, but it turns the clock speed down so you're not burning through the battery as fast. So when you combine that software management experience combined with the hardware and the hardware improvements year over year, I think it's going to make for probably the best Qualcomm series chip we've seen in a very long time, especially if it delivers on what it says it's going to. So that's all I've got. I know this was a big nerd out video. It's very, very long. I know I don't really have a lot of graphics or anything here, but just talking from a hardware perspective, I'm really impressed with what I saw from the information and the material for the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2, and I can't wait to get one when the Samsung phone comes out at the beginning of next year. So that's all I've got. What do you think? Was this interesting walk down processor lane? Do you like hearing and learning about this stuff as opposed to just talking about phones all the time? I know this is the underlying hardware that powers your phone. Again, system on a chip. This little tiny guy right here, the Snapdragon version of that, really is going to power a lot into the future, and I think it's exciting. I get really excited about this stuff. Maybe you don't, and you probably tuned out a long time ago and you haven't seen this video, but I wanted to talk about it, tell you guys and gals out there about the new processor we're going to get, the new flagship for 2023. Got to announce. It's here. So that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I talked a lot today. If you have any questions or comments, things you want to talk about, please go to the comment section. I'll get back with you. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and the subscribe button and a little notification bell if you want updates when new videos come out. And as always, thanks for being here. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys next time.